A dense fog covered the icy waters of the North Atlantic Ocean on August 6, 1942, as a massive Allied convoy circled Greenland on its way to Liverpool. For the past few hours, the ships had been ruthlessly haunted by Wolfpack Steinbrinck, a group of elusive German U-boats tasked with wreaking havoc against Allied supply lines, and the 9 Canadian escorts protecting the cargo ships were straining to safeguard the 32 defenseless vessels amid the treacherous waters and murky skies. HMCS Assiniboine was suddenly ordered to rush back, as 6 of the merchant ships were straggling behind and had left the relative safety of the convoy formation. Minutes later, the Canadian destroyer made visual contact with them, but something was wrong. An ominous column of black smoke was rising from the deck of SS Spar, and she was sinking. As Assiniboine drew closer, the Canadian destroyer dropped her depth charges above the German submarine, but she managed to evade every attack. For the next several hours, a relentless game of cat and mouse ensued, as several U-boats continued to bypass the convoy's defenses and tried to sink more ships, peaking with the ferocious 1-to-1 duel between HMCS Assiniboine and U-210, one of the fiercest naval clashes of the entire war. Wolfpack mentality. Wolfpack Steinbrinck's objective could be discerned from its name alone. Otto Steinbrinck was a legendary World War I U-boat commander responsible for sinking over 200 enemy ships. Now, the elite group of captains had been deployed to the chilly waters of the North Atlantic to sink as many Allied cargo ships as possible. In mid-1942, most cargo ships bound for the British Isles were traveling under the Convoy system, escorted in a defensive formation by several Allied warships tasked with protecting the vessels and hunting down U-boats roaming underwater. Aware of this defensive precaution, Karl Dönitz, the commander of the German U-boat arm, polished the Wolfpack tactic that Germany had experimented with in World War I and transformed it into a modern naval warfare doctrine. Under the Wolfpack doctrine, U-boats would be assigned to a specific region, and they would patrol and engage enemy units independently. Still, if they encountered a large convoy, the location would be transmitted to Dönitz back in Nazi-occupied France. Dönitz would then summon all the U-boats within the pack into the specified location and orchestrate a coordinated attack from his war room, sending orders through the allegedly unbreakable Enigma code. His strategy was highly successful, allowing German submarines to strike in a synchronized manner, potentially sinking several ships and submerging and withdrawing before the escorts could arrange a counteroffensive. Ambush at sea. The convoy SC-94 was comprised of 32 cargo ships and 9 escorts, and it was making the long journey from Sydney, Nova Scotia, to Liverpool, England, where it became Wolfpack Steinbrinck's prey. On August 5th, on the 11th day of the convoy's voyage, U-593 reported visual contact with the Allied ships, and all other members of Wolfpack Steinbrinck were called into positions. Suddenly, the commanding officers in charge of the convoy realized 6 of the cargo ships that had been at the rear of the formation were nowhere to be seen. The Canadian destroyer HMCS Assiniboine was then instructed to search for the missing merchant ships astern of the main convoy. Minutes later, the destroyer sighted the stragglers and approached their position. However, at 4:50 p.m., sentries aboard Assiniboine spotted, quote, a large column of smoke shooting up from one of the ships. The destroyer was still 6 miles away from the group of cargo ships. As she reached her objective, Assiniboine realized that the Dutch merchant ship SS Spar had been attacked by a torpedo, and it was now sinking by the bow. The Flower-class corvette HMCS Aurelia beckoned the direction of the torpedo track to the Canadian destroyer, which, along with the corvette HMS Nasturtium, began dropping depth charges around the torpedo's suspected origin point. U-593 had submerged only minutes before, and the crew could feel the powerful vibrations of the deep-water explosives all around them. Astonishingly, none of the explosions caused irreparable damage. But with no indication of a successful hit, the escorts surrounded the merchant ships and took them back to the main convoy. The tension ran high as the Allied seamen knew that they were being pursued, and a new attack could come at any moment. Lookouts were ordered to remain utterly vigilant as the 40 ships continued their perilous journey through the freezing waters of the Atlantic. Third time's the charm. The following day, sentinels aboard Assiniboine managed to pinpoint an ominous conning tower, surfacing approximately 6 miles ahead of them. The German U-210 had surfaced, confident that the foggy air would conceal her presence. Assiniboine rushed to engage the target, but as the German crew sighted the incoming warship, they swiftly prepared to submerge. Realizing her window was about to close, Assiniboine fired 3 salvos from her guns. Still, the 1-year-old Type 7C German submarine was able to drop underwater unscathed. Assiniboine and corvette HMS Dianthus then scoured the seas looking for the fleeing U-boat. It only took them a few minutes, but Assiniboine soon made sonar contact. Both warships then got ready to release their weapons. Several patterns of depth charges were deployed, shaking the waters to their core, but producing no indications of a hit. The search continued, but there were no signs of the fugitive submarine. Then, at 5:12 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the Assiniboine crew spotted a conning tower through the fog in the distance. Both ships converged on the position of the U-boat, but the mist grew thicker and visibility failed, at times dropping to less than 200 yards. U-210 took advantage and immediately went deep, with contact lost once again. More than an hour would pass before Assiniboine spotted the submarine. This time, she was really close, barely half a mile off the destroyer's position. Assiniboine then dashed towards the submarine at full speed, and before the U-boat could dive for the 3rd time, the ship was on top of her. HMCS Assiniboine versus U-210. A fierce battle ensued, with only a few hundred feet separating the opposing ships. The German submarine's guns began firing at the Canadian destroyer immediately, and for about 35 minutes, the action continued to escalate as the ships danced around each other while struggling to gain the most advantageous position to deliver a devastating blow. The German attacks soon caused a fire on the Canadian ship, and the sailors would have to fight the submarine as they also wrestled the growing flames. Still, the vessels continued to trade fire in a ferocious encircling duel, with U-210 taking constant eluding maneuvers while Assiniboine drove full astern on the inside engine to avoid her enemy from getting inside her turning circle and gaining an advantage. Despite being at such a close range, the U-boat managed to stay below the line of fire from the Assiniboine's 4.7-inch guns, severely limiting the destroyer's firepower capabilities. However, after several minutes that seemed to drag for an eternity, Assiniboine finally landed a few overwhelming shots on the U-boat's conning tower, causing significant damage to the German ship. Some sailors immediately abandoned the submarine, while the captain moved away from the battle and attempted to abruptly dive and flee. However, Assiniboine anticipated the move, and she rushed the submarine, ramming her abaft the conning tower. Severely damaged and forced to resurface, U-210 was now a sitting duck. Final blow. The Canadian destroyer took advantage of her enemy's precarious situation and proceeded to pour fire onto the damaged vessel while ramming her for a 2nd time. The submarine didn't stand a chance. Assiniboine then made another pass and dropped the last pattern of shallow depth charges, while simultaneously delivering a final blow from the Canadian ship's Y-gun. Unable to withstand any more of Assiniboine's onslaught, U-210 finally crumpled, and she sank in less than 2 minutes. Dianthus arrived, just in time to help Assiniboine rescue the 38 German submariners that had survived the attack. Although she had accomplished a formidable triumph, the Canadian ship had been severely damaged. Her hull and deck had been pierced in dozens of places, peppered from machine gun fire, and disfigured by the flames. Also, all the rooms below the waterline behind the provision room had been flooded. Unable to continue in active service, Assiniboine was ordered to return to Canada for repairs. More attacks. The convoy would have to endure 4 more days of continuous attacks from the remainder of Wolfpack Steinbrinck, who would sink 10 more Allied ships before they could reach their destination. However, the Germans would also pay dearly for their unit's ruthless harassment of Convoy SC-94. The U-379 submarine was spotted by HMS Dianthus after the initial encounter, and after managing to submerge, she was forced to surface by a pattern of depth charges. Once above water, Dianthus opened fire and rammed the U-boat forward of the conning tower. After 3 additional ram strikes from the British corvette, U-379 finally sank on August 8th. Despite the sinking of 2 of its units, the campaign was an enormous success for the German submariners, who sank 59,560 gross registered tons of cargo and severely damaged 3 other merchant ships. The entire pursuit lasted 7 days, but as determined and fearless as the German hunters were, the Allied escort crew members had the bravery and resolve to match their opponents. Even when thinly spread, the 9 warships did everything in their power to repel the German Wolfpack and protect their own. What remained of the convoy reached Liverpool on August 13th. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed this story, please consider hitting the like button and sharing it with someone who might like it. And don't forget to subscribe to this and all the other channels in our Dark Documentaries family for more fascinating history-inspired content. Also hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest videos, and stay tuned for more.